Today's guest, Nigel Robinson, is an incredibly strategic dude. He started his career off at A16Z in the venture capital space, one of the top VC firms in the world, and currently works in an executive recruiting firm where he's recruiting for companies that are doing space travel, that are doing crazy, AI products and services, and he gets to rub shoulders with some of the smartest people in the world on a daily basis. And our conversation today really dives into the VC space as well as potentially the intersection of the VC space and Web3 and what that looks like over the coming years. Business strategy, as well as just some of our shared interests around philosophy, spirituality, and how we're applying those to our daily lives. What's good, guys? We got Nigel Robinson here today on the show on Ascendance. Nigel's been a leader and friend of mine that I've been communicating with and following here for a few years. And it's a pretty wide variety of experience, from working at Andreessen Horowitz, one of the biggest VC firms in the world, to, executive recruiting for some pretty incredible tech companies, to, hip hop and arts and everything in between. So Nigel, really appreciate you being on the show today.
Nah, man, I appreciate you having me for real.
It's kind of funny, like the first conversations I remember having with you, I think was with our mutual friend Colton. It was kind of like, damn, I've been looking my whole life for people that like understood how I think and conceptualize the world. And you and Colton, I think, were the two people that I met on my journey where I was like, okay, there are other people out there that think like this, right? I'm not crazy. So.
Yeah, you are not alone. Yeah, Colton is like that. I mean, he was at the time, I think, trying to assemble his own group of Avengers to go and like take
Yeah.
on the future. No, absolutely. It was kind of weird finding so many like minds in one small group chat, you know.
Yeah, I'd love to, before we get into, I want to talk about Web3, of course, and we've been having some discussions around it, but I'd love to just dive in a little bit for some context to your background. Can you give me like a 1 minute synopsis of kind of your professional journey and what's brought you here and what you're currently doing?
Yeah. So, yeah, my professional career started at A16Z. I was brought in to help build out the college talent network. They were basically sending me on tour to top CS universities like Cornell, UCLA, MIT, Stanford, Berkeley, UC San Diego, Georgia Tech. And I would just go to these hackathons and career fairs and just meet all the young technologists and young founders and basically help them get into portfolio companies and build the brand of our portfolio companies on these campuses. And I did that for about 2.5 years. And yeah, I mean, I literally met like thousands of students. And this was back when it was kind of the original cast of unicorns, I guess. It was Lyft, Slack, GitHub, Reddit, all of those folks kind of coming up. And from there, I did another year at Google doing leadership hiring for Google Cloud's first initiative. From there, I did another year recruiting at Ouster, a digital LiDAR company that has since gone public. And now I am a principal at Build Talent, and we focus on executive recruiting for startups, everything seed through growth, with a focus on product and engineering leaders. And yeah, we've gotten a chance to work with genomics companies, robotics companies, space companies, SaaS companies, crypto companies, and just kind of getting a chance to see the landscape across all these directions. It's been dope.
No, that's super dope. So I got to ask, what was the culture like when you were working at A16Z?
Man, you know, I think when I first got in, I was really expecting it to be just like very stuffy finance people. And at that point, they were not yet the A16Z brand I think that people think of today. Like it felt much more scrappy. It felt like a startup. It felt like a startup that would like never run out of money, and there was like new initiatives that were popping off. We had new programs that we were playing with, even in my small section of it. But yeah, I would say culturally, like very tech heavy, not finance heavy. And like the founder friendly environment, I guess, was something, I didn't have context for it then, but I see now that the founder friendly environment that they were able to create was really in contrast with, I think, the other competitors at the time, or the frenemies in the VC space at the time. But very youth oriented. It was like more than 50% women at the time that I was there. It was
Oh, that's dope.
yeah, it was like a third was black or Hispanic, and a lot of them were young like me at the time, who were just way ahead of the curve in a lot of ways. I treat it, I see it as like an MBA program that I went through. Really, like they turned me into a different kind of business partner. It wasn't really just recruiting, but yeah, I
Yeah,
mean,
no, I don't think their reputation, maybe it's just in the circles that I've been in, but I don't think a lot of people think of them as like a super diverse, company. But that's awesome to hear. I mean, obviously, it's been reflected in the success that they've been having with their tech investments.
yeah. I mean, I think the other thing is when I was there, people kind of saw them as like, you know, I think people in tech, you do a lot of brand collecting, like logo collecting on your resume. People will go from Google to Facebook to Amazon and just kind of run that gambit. And I think people at the time were using A16Z kind of as that placeholder. And they'd spend like a year or two there and then go found a company, or a year or two there and then go join another VC at a higher rank or whatever. And yeah, like it
Right.
was.
Just use it as a stepping stone.
Exactly. The tenure had to have been like 2 years or something ridiculous. Like aside from the core cast that built it up, all the partners and kind of different functional leaders, I feel like a lot of the people that came in were just like a couple of years and then bounced to the next thing. But yeah, I mean, I think everyone who's passed in there has good things to say about it and is grateful. Everyone's in a better place now, I think, having passed through.
No, that's dope. And I mean, it's interesting with VCs. I've never worked at one, but there's kind of mixed opinions oftentimes in the tech community on you know how these brands are portrayed, and sometimes they're portrayed more as the shark and just kind of coming in
Right.
to make their money, and of course they are making money. That is the point, but I'm sure it's not not often said like how important the position in the ecosystem that they play is, right? I mean,
Yeah.
they definitely empower a lot of the tech development and entrepreneurial development that happens, from Silicon Valley to any tech hub around the world.
Yeah, I mean, to that point, like A16Z absolutely pioneered this VC service model that we see. Like at the time, we were probably a lot bigger than even most VCs that you found. And it's because they just had so many resources that they were offering to founders. Like, not only did you have a college talent network that would help build your brand among the youth and help you get interns and help you get the juniors converting to senior offer type of thing, but then you also had the professional talent network, and then you had the executive talent network, and then you had the market development team, and then you had the business development team where you're, small startups that are trying to break into enterprise but could never get one of these larger enterprises on the phone or in a boardroom. They would just invite them in and basically set up these meetings between companies in the portfolio and potential customers. And now you see pretty much everyone reverting to this service based model. All the VCs are getting talent partners and finding ways to like offer this support. And now you even have executive search firms that are playing as venture firms, because in the world where capital is a commodity and it's not really like scarce to raise, you can raise money from anybody. It's like the question of, why do I take this money? What am I getting? How is this VC, how is this firm going to support me as a founder in this journey? That has become really top of mind, I think, for a lot of people.
Yeah, and it's really, I mean, that's awesome to say that, because I think it's really about ecosystem, right? And I think that's where things need to go, is less of a cut and dry. This is just a capital deal type of thing, and more so of how do I fit my idea, my brands, my business into an ecosystem, and every dollar that I take, right, that dollar comes with lots of other things attached to it, right? That could be good or bad, right? And
Right.
so, if you can create an ecosystem where you're not just, I mean, the connections that are made between portfolio companies, for example,
Hmm.
in a large firm, that can make or break the success of a brand, right? Or open up a whole new world of possibility for, your business model, your, whatever it is. So I think that's another thing that isn't really talked about as much with VC, but I think it's super important, especially going into Web3.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I mean, even in the talent space, we talk a lot about ecosystems of excellence. Like, has this person seen an environment of excellence before? A lot of people, you want to win a championship, but you never been on a championship team. You might not know what it takes. And so absolutely the ecosystem is critical. It's the right soil. You got to find the right soil, as a company, as an individual.
100%. So switching gears to, looking at, I mean, we just had a conversation a couple of weeks ago about Web3 and really, some of the cool emerging business models that, could be really dope to experiment with in the space. But I know, Jack Dorsey's been pretty, and other leaders, but him in particular, have been pretty outspoken about Web3 being this basically VC playground, and VCs are just all going to own Web3, and it's going to be this centralized thing, and all the decentralized stuff is bullshit. What do you think about that?
I think both can exist. I see what Jack is saying, you know, where it's a spectrum. Centralized and decentralized are spectrums, or exist on a continuum. A lot of these things are not, if it's run by a company, it's not fully decentralized. That's just like, it's just how it works. I don't think you can have centralized leadership in a decentralized product, but honestly, I think that it's an interesting race to see who gets to really make the biggest impact, because to me, it's not intuitive or obvious that a decentralized route is the best route, and I don't think that the as crypto and web3 become more mainstream, I don't think that the masses truly care all that much if it's decentralized. They really just care about their experience on whatever platform or with the product or with the service. Whether it's decentralized or not is, I don't think, really plays into that. But um, VCs are going to VC, founders are going to founder, customers are going to customer. Like, I really think that there's like the purists of the crypto Web3 space who are really clinging to the promises that were made way back, and that is, like, in many ways those values continue to drive the industry forward. But I think they've become less prominent in the business landscape. There's a lot of people out there just like with extraction business models, or just like Web 2 business models in a Web 3 sandbox. And
Right.
yeah, I don't have any kind of like judgment call on what's right or what's wrong, but I think uh it's ultimately going to come down to these ecosystems, community development and like execution. Ultimately, like, there's still a lot of things to be, I think, sorted out on like the privacy, security, um landscape there. But yeah, it feels very wild, wild west right now.
Totally. Yeah, and I to some extent I agree with you. I mean, I think decentralization is a great ethos, and I think the fact that that idea is out in the world now, and there's potentially more decentralized models and more ownership, specifically ownership of data, I think is
Right.
really important to bring up, and removing unnecessary middlemen and predatory business models across a lot of industries. But at the end of the day, we're not going to hand off all of our governance to a computer code and have no centralization, right? So
Yeah.
there's definitely a balance. But I think and would love to maybe hear your perspective on this too, given what you do in the recruiting space. But I think for me, one of the biggest values that I see in Web3, and why I'm starting companies in the space, is I think it's a huge opportunity to build community, and whether or not that's specifically because of the technology or just the culture that's surrounding it,
Mhm.
it's probably a bit of both. But the way that communities are coordinating and developing in the space, to me, is maybe the most exciting aspect of it.
Yeah, I agree. I agree that that's what's most exciting. And shout out to Colton. He has this line where he says localization is decentralization, and that the more local it is, it inherently decentralizes from the broader view. And like I really like that a lot. And seeing that there's now like Austin DAO and Miami DAO, it really, I mean, there's a whole lot there of like who gets to represent a city, who get like what kind of people raise their hand to represent a city, how inclusive or expansive is their mission, how do they go about recruiting toward that mission, how do you go about funding that mission, how are decisions made, like all of this is still being fleshed out, but for sure it introduces a lot of new dynamics that I don't think were really there in the old one. I even think about the Reddit community, and now they have this thing where you can like, give props or whatever and big up people on posts, and there's kind of like some credibility economy or something that's being developed. But um I agree that I have not seen communities spawn so rapidly, but I don't know. It's still, in my view, it still seems like a lot of noise. It seems like, people are joining the Discord for the airdrop and not for the community. People are
Yeah,
joining
it's a lot of hype.
yeah. And so, but there's real ones that I've seen too that are just as exciting. And there was another one in Austin that I saw. Oh, I wish I could remember the name, but they were like literally trying to go and build a little village outside of Austin. And
Is it like camp or something?
yeah,
Cabin,
yeah,
cabin down? I
yeah.
think I'm in their Discord.
Yeah, so like that's super interesting because they're trying to map it to the real world. It's not just this internet community that exists for the internet and does internet things. It's like they're trying to create an internet community that is decentralized but maps back to a lived experience. And
Mm.
yeah, there's things like that I think are really interesting. But I have a lot of people ask me like, what is a DAO? Like, how is it any different from a group chat? How is it any different from just a regular company even? And for how a lot of these things are ran, it's not clear. It feels like organizations are organizations, and there's kind of like rules, I guess, are universals that come with being a part of an organization. That it's not, yeah, it's not obvious the way that DAOs will meaningfully change that or adapt to this community oriented idea.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. And in a lot of cases, from what I've seen, to echo that, there's people that say they're running a DAO or they're implementing these models, but it's really it's not any different than a Web2 business.
Yeah.
Um, but again, I think it's the culture that's surrounding the idea of starting a DAO and starting a Web3 community, and hopefully, I mean, there's a lot of cash grabs out there, but you talk about mapping to real world experiences, hopefully moving past what we saw in Web2, which was all the major apps are really just competing to get you into the digital world for as
Mm,
much time as possible so they can make money off advertising. And hopefully we can create some better economic models where we can relocalize. And yeah, Colton has some incredible ideas on that from a design perspective. But I'm really interested to see how that develops over the next couple of years because I do think it's very unclear, but it could go in some cool directions.
Yeah, I think the kernel is trust, that you can't build anything without trust. And like one of the biggest hurdles that Web3 has is like, how do you build and sustain trust? Like, you got to make the promise, keep the promise, strengthen the promise kind of the entire way through. And, there was this whole debacle with the latest Yuga Labs drop for the other side. And I was just reading through the Twitter threads of people feeling betrayed, by the community. They're like, oh, they've shown their true colors. Like, clearly now it's a cash grab. They don't really care about, expanding the community or really democratizing the space. And, and for them, according to the pitch deck, it's a metaverse play, which is not wholly unlike these other ideas of like walled garden environments, just like keep them in the ecosystem and not even, it doesn't have to be like malevolent or nefarious extraction uh, type of thinking. But it is not on its face democratizing play for like really broadening the scope of the mission beyond just that brand and what they're selling. um, which is not like a knock on them. There's no real imperative for any company to try and make better business for other companies, but it brings us back to this idea of like decentralization. How does that map? And like, I think that community is like 27,000 people or something like that, which is like nothing of the internet community, let alone like any particular city. And so, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of like blueprints out there, but it doesn't seem like any of them are necessarily a path to paradise.
No, and at the end of the day, I mean, that's kind of why I started this podcast too. I mean, I think Web3 tech, everything just reflects the humans behind it, right?
Right.
And so if we don't, especially as people who are early to the space and involved in relevant businesses and brands that have real impact on people's lives, I think it's our responsibility to look at, how do we ascend? How do we develop ourselves, as humans, right? And all the things that come with that. We teach kids. First it was we were teaching kids history. Now we're like, okay, we got to get them in coding boot camps. Great, but you still got to teach them how to regulate their own emotions and deal with whatever concept of spirituality is in their heads. And like, how do you? I mean, there's just so much that we don't talk about when we talk about tech and all these utopian ideas, right, on the human side that I think. In a lot of ways, people get lost in the sauce or lost in the tech, and they think they're solving all these problems, but then they wake up and they shut their laptop, they turn off their phone, and they realize they're still a human. They still haven't really fixed the core things that we've been dealing with for thousands and thousands of years.
Man, I had this chat with a young technologist when I was doing the college talent network thing. And this is like one of the smartest kids I'd ever met. Like he had internships everywhere that he could have wanted. And we had this talk about if the universe is stochastic, and like if he in his view it's all just if you theoretically had enough computation, you could calculate exactly kind of the deterministic elements of the universe, and know exactly what happens next. And we went through the idea maze, and I was like, yeah, but even if you had that machine in your ear and it was telling you exactly the next thing you need to do in order to optimize whatever it was, whether to be rich, to be happy, even if it told you exactly what to do and exactly how to do it, you still would not be able to get rid of your narrator. Like the voice in your head that creates the story of your life and who you are and what this is all about, that little piece of technology is not going to, free you from your own humanness, like your the messiness of your own emotional states and your story. And I feel like he like short circuited off that conversation. Like he was really, I think it really stressed him out. But that is 1,000%. Like we have real human problems that are underneath all of this technology, and maybe it helps us understand ourselves better or helps us organize ourselves better. But like it's not really; these aren't really solutions to being human. And I don't know. I don't
Yeah.
know if looking for a solution to being human is even the right idea, but absolutely.
I don't think that's the point. I think the journey is this experience is here for a reason.
Right.
I think it's maybe prideful to say that we fully understand why we're having this experience, right? And
Yeah.
to the point of, yeah, that's a profound realization for someone to have. I mean, I had a similar realization when I was 24, 25, and doing a lot of work in the entertainment space and marketing and influencer marketing and entertainment show concert promotions. And I was meeting all these people. I met people like Rick Ross. I met people that I thought were like in this other stratosphere to me, and I was in all these environments and parties and and I realized like all these things that I thought were these definitions of success, or like I got to get here to make it, right? I realized they didn't really mean anything, right? And the people that had them, I didn't even necessarily, not in all cases, but in a lot of cases, I didn't even necessarily want their life
Yeah.
or want what they had, right? And so if you get past the idea of like there's one game and it's like success and I got to get there, right? And hopefully I wish I could have this Neuralink or this, you know, whatever we're going to call it,
Yeah.
thing that's going to tell me exactly how to get there. You might get there and you might not actually be happy, right? You
Right.
might realize that that wasn't the point.
Yeah. Yeah. Like you can optimize for anything, but yeah, it's not really the point. Like life is not an optimization algorithm, or at least like I don't try to live my life like that exactly, but you know, to each their own, I guess. But yeah, I mean, I don't think anyone would say that we've like mastered, you know, the human environment, you know, mastered the design of human environment or mastered the design of human organization. And there's still so much work to be done across the board on all of these things. And you know, Web3 tools as an organizing force, or as you know, helping people organize themselves in more ways and faster and with greater incentive structures. Like all of that is really promising. But to your original point, like it's to what end is really the question. You know, is it to create shareholder value? You know, like
Yeah, right. Or profits for the next quarter to
yeah,
get make your stockholders happy. Yeah,
exactly.
interesting. On the note of taking companies private, what do you think of the Twitter acquisition?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I don't know Elon, but I'd like to believe that he actually cares. I feel like he spent most of his career trying to create things that are like like net positive on creating a better future for people. You know, whether it's the clean energy solar stuff, whether it's like the EVs and whether it's like the space stuff. I feel like a lot of people don't really appreciate how important the space stuff is. I hear like, well, why are we going to space? We haven't even fixed things on Earth. It's like going to space helps fix things on Earth. but um, but yeah, I mean, so as far as like Twitter, I think there's a few ways it could go. I think that Elon is kind of known for underestimating engineering challenges in some sense, and so it's totally possible that he is underestimating the engineering challenge of global content moderation, um, and the dangers that come without that moderation. Like that could also be something he's underestimating. But yeah, I mean, I don't inherently think it's a bad or a good thing. It's like I'm very much like wait and see. He's one of the highest level operators walking the planet. You know, it's like could he do something meaningful with it? I think absolutely. But you know, there's always going to be pros and cons of it, I think. But um, yeah, I don't know that a global platform that serves the purpose that Twitter does should be like publicly owned by the shareholders of like mostly a handful of countries, even, you know. Um, yeah, it is a weird thing, but it's all this is all an experiment. It's all the social experiment. Yeah,
Yeah, I heard an interesting opinion recently that someone, I forget who it was, but they were saying that they think Elon's gonna probably implement a bunch of changes and increase the stock value, but then end up, in a few years, like donate it, turn it
mm,
into a nonprofit or like donate it to something
mm,
and just like leave it in a trust or under the guise of some like NGO or nonprofit organization,
yeah,
which
yeah.
would be really interesting.
Yeah, I've heard of him. I've heard like, oh, maybe he'll make it just like an open protocol that just exists on chain somehow, and you know, it's like a Wikipedia, like Twitter as a wiki type of situation. But again, I don't know that those are any better models exactly. Like you'll get a different environment, you'll get a you know different communities partaking, but yeah, it's like to what again to what end and you know his idea of free speech like that's an American value or maybe let's say a Western value, but it's not obvious that the rest of the world thinks that's like the thing that should be preserved. But and close my Twitter, these clicks are killing me, or my Slack. But yeah,
Slack, yeah, I heard that.
but yeah, I mean, I generally think I play in the private company space. Like that's what I enjoy. I enjoy working with founders, trying to build something really big and impactful without having to think about the oversight of you know, of shareholder value, I guess. You know, you have VC stuff, but largely they just need you to keep growing more than anything.
Right. And if you get to the point where you're hitting IPO and you have that momentum build, you're probably in a different conversation at that point anyway.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, like in that same way, like it's not clear like how these DAOs will do it. You know, like can you imagine like Yugabytes going public? Like what is that even? Yeah, I'm trying to think like of
Because they raise money, right?
yeah, they did raise money. They got a bunch of VC money, and a lot of these crypto things have started raising VC money. A lot more VCs raising crypto funds. Now they're starting to invest internationally as well. Like I know India is coming online now with crypto regulations, so there's about to be probably another gold rush over there. But yeah, I don't know that what going public does for a company like that. Because if I sell NFTs as a part of my company and I already raise hundreds of millions of dollars from selling NFTs, like why do I need shareholder money? Why do I need even excess venture money after those initial rounds? Like it's just not it's not an obvious answer to me like if I was a founder building that, like why would I want that exactly?
And I feel like a lot of these companies are just doing it because they can, because they're
Yeah.
like, there's we're in a position of power and leverage now. We have access to a bunch of capital. Why not, take that capital? But taking the capital doesn't. Again, it's back to that same issue of like, is just more growth, more capital,
Mhm.
more, is that better for you?
Yeah, is more
And
actually more. Yeah.
yeah, it's like what game are you actually playing, right? And that's again kind of the whole point of this brand and this podcast I'm creating. Ascendance is really about like having that conversation about where our growth is going, right? And
Yeah.
on an individual level and a collective level. And that's for Web3, it'd be nice to see an evolution again of the ecosystem around. If we're funding these huge brands like Yuga Labs, right, who built a maybe $1 billion, I don't know if that's correct, but probably close, $1 billion brands, in a year, right, which
Yeah.
is insane.
Yeah.
Um, there's ecosystems developing around that brand now,
Right.
right? There's probably other companies that could be spun off and built around that ecosystem that they're developing. Obviously, they got a metaverse game coming out now. But again, where does all this go, right? Are they
Yeah.
going to compete with Meta, with Facebook? I mean, it's still kind of unclear, with a lot of these companies where this growth is going, where it's ending up. And I guess to some extent, the whole space is developing. So we don't
Yeah.
fully know. We're just trying to build it, in real time. But I think that discussion from a leadership standpoint is important, because otherwise
Yeah.
we're just going to keep dumping money into it because we can. But then it's like, well, how did that actually impact our real lived experience?
Yeah, one of the things that's interesting is like, the NFT market has created these overnight millionaires, multimillionaires, and those people are turning around and becoming angel investors and other Web3 stuff. And so now you're getting like this trickle effect. It's like Reagan would love this. This is like the trickle down that you dreamed of, I'm sure, is like you get these millionaires and now they're investing in smaller Web3 stuff where the liquidation cycles are so much faster. It's so much easier to build and create these communities because of these tools. Um, yeah, and it's like, but these are now we're getting capital allocators that have no background in finance, no background in building as operators, building companies. It's literally just I don't know. It's like a friends thing, If you think about it, it's who you know. Like who gets to participate in those rounds of like these early stage crypto Web3 stuff that you would only know about if you're playing in the community, whether it's hype or not. Because I'm sure there's probably some investor out there who got rich off of one of these NFTs and have pretty much only funded scams ever since. They've only funded other
Probably.
projects that were really just carpet pulling the carpet out or whatever they say. But yeah, that's a piece that's really interesting. But from the leadership level, like we're absolutely seeing real operators pick their head up for some of these moves. Like, we helped Coin Tracker hire their VP of engineering, and that's Gaurav Garg, who was the former VP of engineering from Uber, which is, like this global logistics platform. And now he's playing Web3 game. And, we hired the VP of engineering at OpenSea, and he used to be the VP of engineering at SpaceX working for Elon, which is like such a wild twist to that story of someone who was building a space company, and now he's playing in Web3. And so we're definitely seeing like high level operators from real companies pick their head up and start taking this world a little more seriously. And that is only going to continue, I think. And so going back to like the execution piece and even the trust piece, like not only do you have to build trust with customers, obviously, but you have to build trust with leaders to like for them to take this kind of bet on you. Like you don't really build a $1 billion business without getting some adults in the room who know what they're doing and have that expertise to bring to a company. And so I think that's a little bit of the game that we're seeing being played right now. You know, if I'm a founder in Web3, I'm definitely going to try and raise some VC money just to get the credibility badge for hiring executives, or just to break into that network where I can say like,
Right.
oh, I'm an A16Z funded crypto company.
Which again is access to an ecosystem. Right?
Exactly.
You're buying access
Ecosystems
to
of
an
excellence.
ecosystem.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
this in many ways, not in many ways, in some way it works against the decentralization piece because you're kind of tapping into what is a relatively centralized network in order to like play that game, I guess. Um but yeah, I mean it's coming. I think the other thing that the silver lining in all of this kind of every way it goes that we've talked about before is just new methods and ways of ownership for creatives. I feel like the past couple centuries, let's say, have been dominated by technology IP, and we're finally coming around to an era where creative IP is actually a meaningful leverage point. And for all the various creatives out there, like it's never been a better time, I feel like, to be an artist. I really believe that. And it's part of because of this ecosystem thing, because of all these tools. But I think that whoever, we have this founder friendly for VC, I feel like artist friendly for Web3 is actually a really fertile path for a platform, for a company.
Yeah, no, the rise of and the reinstatement of the value of the artist, well, really in new ways that we've never seen before. I would say is super exciting. And I know you're a musician, you're a hip hop artist yourself. And I we've talked about the music space a little bit, and I got a project, a creator token project in that space. Super excited about new economic models for artists. For music specifically, how do you, with your visibility and interest in that space, how do you see this, maybe having some impact with the music industry?
Yeah, right now, I think there's still not a, a good enough on ramp into crypto and Web3 for most people. It's like, even if I had a million people waiting to buy my project, if I released that project where you could only get it from in crypto, like how many of those people have a crypto wallet? You pick any million amount of sample size of a million. How many of them have a crypto wallet? It's less than 20% of Americans holding crypto at all, and that's in America where we're on the frontier. So globally, it's probably much less than that. And so I think until the on ramp getting into this space is made just more and increasingly accessible with more trust, I think it's probably a hard sell. I know that there are artists who are playing in that realm, but I would doubt that it makes up a meaningful percentage of whatever they're doing. Um, and then it goes back to the centralized piece. I think a lot of it has to do with smart contracts, and smart contracts are still pretty esoteric. It doesn't seem like there's like a lot of companies that have made that very accessible and like increased the usability and like the well designed elements for non technical artists to be able to participate in a way that's easy and feels good. And so I feel like that's kind of the horizon point too. Is like, we just got done sharing our masters with record labels. Are we going to turn around and start sharing our masters with these platforms instead, or are we going to start sharing our masters with just like speculative investors who are not actually like real supporters and listeners? And what does that look like on a long tail? As a founder, you're only really looking to give up so much of your company between each round. And as an artist, it's like, how much of your work are you really interested in giving up to participate in this way or that way? And yeah, I feel like there's a lot of tension points in there that have yet to be worked out. But as someone who ownership is a huge value of mine, at least for anything that I create. I'm definitely keeping my eye on the space because I'm not interested really in selling my masters to anybody. But yeah, like
Yeah, and I think there's been a lot of focus on like the security NFT play and Nas and Royal, and
mhm,
which I think is cool. But it's yeah, to your point, it's still selling masters, right? And it's still
mhm,
taking, which is again, you're taking a Web 2 business model and you're cutting it up with a Web 3 technology and you're packaging it differently, but it's the same thing.
right, right,
So I think, hopefully long term and, hoping to play some part in this in some small way with my company Odia, but, hopefully long term, there's new economic models and new revenue streams that arise on top of what currently exists, as opposed to just taking, the same pie and cutting it up in new ways. Part of that could look like, creating valuable communities and having token models where there's inherent value then, and you're able to capture more of that value. Whereas, it's maybe harder to capture that value of a huge community as an artist when you're just getting paid for streaming and touring. So new ways to capture the value that you're creating, and I'm sure there's brand collaboration models and stuff in there that could be developed. I'm optimistic about, but yeah, again, it's still early and it's still a bit esoteric, and mainstream artists communities, really don't have Web3 wallets. So there is that dissonance between the Web3 community who would go buy an NFT and the mainstream who still doesn't know, the difference between Bitcoin and Ethereum.
yeah. I think the other thing that's like playing in the background of all this is that music generally has become less profitable for artists. Like that is not really where they make the money. It's like the music is the commercial, and through that commercial you sell fashion, you sell various brands, you sell lifestyles, you sell that's like, yeah, it's the commercial, it's the soundtrack for your commercial through which you sell all the other things. Um and that is meaningful in a music market where all the money is being made on old music, not on new music. It's like if the music is just the tip of the spear, if it's just like the top of the funnel to get people in to sell, it's like how does how does an artist leverage a Web3 platform knowing that that's the case? It's almost like the forward-looking statements like, oh, if you buy this music, then you'll have access to XYZ, assuming you have some kind of production line as an artist or something, that you have merch that's following this project, or that you have tour ticket sales stuff that's following the project. And if you have brand, like if I'm Travis Scott and I sell an NFT that gets you a coupon for the McDonald's burger that I brand collaboration that I have, where you get X amount off of the Cactus Jack Nikes, that's a very different sell than like, oh, you'll get early release access to new projects or something. And like again, it goes back to the ecosystem, like the NFT becoming, or the Web3 component being more valuable based on the ecosystem that artist plays in, not really just about the music itself. Um, yeah,
Yeah, and that's really, I mean, with Bored Ape and Yuga Labs, I mean, the value of a picture of an ape is not worth anything but the social value of what that represents. And then the ecosystem and the community of other, potentially well off or famous people that now own them gives you access to, that's very valuable.
yeah,
So,
like
yeah,
going to Harvard for an MBA. It's like, yeah, the MBA is valuable, but it's really the network of other people that are going to be there getting a
right.
Harvard
And the brand
MBA.
association to Harvard.
Right. And it's really more like that, where it's not, what you're paying for is really that exposure and that access and uh that network. It's really not the ape itself.
Right.
And yeah, I think it's
100%.
similar with music, and I think that's a weird thing for artists to figure out.
Totally. Yeah, so wrapping up here, I do have one last question I'd like to ask you. So, Nigel, if you were to die tomorrow, what is the one message or the one thing that you would like to leave in the world to remember you by? What is the one thing that, you would like the life of Nigel Robinson to represent?
Mm. Yeah, how I try and live my life is just encouraging and inspiring and providing opportunities in game for other people. Like I have a lot wrapped up into this idea of giving game, guidance, attention, motivation, and education. Shout out to Wallow and Gilly. But giving game is like, I feel like I'm a natural born researcher. My hyper curiosity allows me to kind of expand beyond the disciplines that I know or just the spaces that I play in. And as much encouragement and inspiration and game as I can give to everyone I come across, like, you know, I would like to be able to die knowing that I helped as many people as I could move forward, toward whatever they were aiming at. It's like even my job, as a recruiter, I'm in the underdog business. I'm in the win-win business. Like, we work with founders who have the odds set against them, trying to manifest their dreams and creating win-win situations out of them and leaders that are capable of helping build it with them. And so pretty much all of my activity is really generated toward that. Even the art that I make is about working with other artists to make their best work, or to bring artists together that maybe would not have otherwise collaborated. Um, and so, yeah, maybe not a message, but definitely like a legacy that I'd like to leave behind is just like for people to have those memories of me, that like I helped them when I could. I gave all the game that I had while I was here. And yeah, I would feel good passing with that.
Love it. No, and I definitely see you embodying that. I appreciate you being on the show, Nigel. Always good to chat.
No doubt, man. Appreciate you.